The lot smelled like burnt copper and old regret. 9 hectares of it. Dead engines stacked 3 stories tall. Hull plating from 6 different wars leaning against each other like veterans at a bar nobody wanted to drink in anymore. Vreth 7 moved through the rows with 2 arms behind his back, and 2 working the scanner, pricing everything by weight and material yield, and the specific mathematics of desperation that had been his native language for 11 years. He was good at this. He was only good at this. The Scarville salvage yard sat at the outermost ring of the consortium's commercial territory, which meant it was the place things ended up when nobody wanted to argue about them anymore. Nobody came here looking for treasure. You came here because treasure was what you used to believe in, before things happened to you, and now you believed in margins. He had 3,000 credits in his operating account. He had a hauler with a cracked secondary coolant line he'd been patching with sealant tape for 4 months. He had a debt notice from the consortium commercial registry that he'd folded into quarters and put in his left breast pocket instead of reading, because reading it wouldn't make the number smaller. He turned left past a row of Dothari freighters, their cargo bays stripped to the framing, and stopped. The ship sat at the back of the lot. It was large in the way that makes you recalibrate what large means. Not tall exactly. Wide. Low-slung. The kind of shape that doesn't announce itself, just occupies space until you notice there isn't any space left. The hull was gray. Regulation gray. Institutional gray. The gray of something that had never needed to look like anything other than what it was. But the paint was peeling in long strips, each layer underneath a slightly different shade, each shade a different year, a different assignment, a different place this ship had been when the galaxy was arranged differently than it was now. Vreth counted the layers. 11. At least 11 coats of paint. He priced the paint. He did not know why he priced the paint. He moved closer, scanner running, and found the hull designation under 40 years of scorch scoring and small debris pitting. The letters had been deep stamped, not painted. Someone had wanted this name to stay. UES Anabasis, Terran Fleet Command, Vessel Class, Executioner. He wrote it down in his ledger. He had a ledger. 400 years of digitized record-keeping across the galaxy, and Vreth 7 kept a paper ledger, because his father had kept a paper ledger, and his father's father, and because the consortium had seized every digital account he'd ever held, and paper was the one thing they needed a person physically present to take. He flagged down the yard auctioneer, a Kelvari like himself, 3rd-generation salvage caste, skin the amber brown of someone who spent too much time in dock lighting, and not enough anywhere else. The auctioneer came over with the half-attentive expression of a person doing 6 things mentally and 1 thing physically, and Vreth pointed at the hull designation. The auctioneer read it. The auctioneer went quiet. Not the quiet of ignorance. Not the quiet of someone who didn't know what they were looking at. The other kind of quiet. The kind that happens when a name you thought was safely in the past turns up in the present wearing the same face it always wore. He sold it to Vreth for 11,000 credits. Did not negotiate. Did not look at the ship again. Did not make eye contact when he handed over the transfer documents. Vreth stood there for a moment. 11,000 was below scrap weight market value for a hull that size, which meant either the yard was running the numbers wrong or the auctioneer wanted this particular transaction to conclude as fast as possible and was willing to take a loss to make that happen. Both options were interesting. Neither option was his problem. He was a scrap merchant. Interesting was not a line item. Margin was a line item. At 11,000 for this much raw material, his margin was the best it had been in 2 years, and his bioluminescent skin pulsed the pale yellow of genuine satisfaction, the color Kelvari go when they've beaten the number they were expecting. He walked back toward his hauler to arrange tow cables. Behind him, the auctioneer stood at the edge of the lot for a long time. He made a private comm call. Vreth did not see it. He was doing mental arithmetic and he was feeling, for the first time in a long time, something adjacent to good. He would learn, in approximately 71 hours, what 11,000 credits buys when you spend them wrong. Vreth started stripping the ship the next morning. He worked methodically because he always worked methodically, because methodical was the container that held everything else together, because the day he stopped working methodically was the day the other feeling had room to expand, and he was not giving the other feeling room. 2 arms on the cable pullers, 2 on the scanner, hull plating first, then conduit lines, then the interior systems, working outward from the engineering core. He found the galley on his 3rd hour of work. It was deep in the ship's midsection, down a corridor that still had its lighting strips intact, which meant the emergency power cells were holding after 4 decades, which said something about whoever had built this ship's power infrastructure, that Vreth filed away as interesting, and immediately set aside because interesting was not a line item. The galley was small. 8 seats, a food processor on one wall, a heating unit on another, and a shelf of sealed supply canisters along the back wall that had been vacuum preserved and were, by the look of them, perfectly intact. He ran the scanner. 43 canisters, various contents. The first one his scanner flagged was a beverage canister, human origin. The label read, ground coffee, dark roast, single origin, best before 2387. It was now 2431. Vreth stood there holding the canister. He priced it. Antique human artifacts had real resale value in certain collector markets. Nostalgia for vanished species was a niche, but consistent revenue stream. A sealed, vacuum-preserved beverage container from a Terran fleet vessel, in this condition, could pull 300 credits from the right buyer, maybe 400. He should put it in the sale pile. He put it in his satchel. He told himself it was for appraisal purposes. He did not examine this. He went back to work. The power relay was in a junction box behind the galley's east wall panel, and he found it while tracing the conduit lines. It looked like a power cell. Same housing dimensions, same connector gauge, same mount configuration. He got his extraction tool in behind it and pulled. The lights came on. Not emergency lighting. All of it. Every strip, every panel, every status indicator on every surface of the ship, coming up in sequence. A wave of illumination rolling outward from engineering toward the bow. The hum of capacitors feeding into systems that had been dark for 43 years and were now, by some miracle of human engineering redundancy, fully operational. Vreth stood very still. A voice said, "Anabasis rebooting. Please identify yourself." It was low, unhurried, female in register, with an accent that had no analog in Vreth's experience. Not regional exactly, more like a way of placing words that assumed they would land where aimed and did not feel the need to push them. The tone of someone who had never needed to oversell anything. Vreth, across 4 arms, did 4 things at once. He dropped the coffee canister. He reached for his comm with his upper left. He backed into the corridor wall with his lower body. And he grabbed the coffee canister again before it rolled under the shelf, because it was for appraisal purposes and he needed it intact. He said, because nothing else came to him, "I own this ship." The voice processed this. The pause was short, less than a second. But it was a pause, and something about a pause from a system that clearly processed at speeds where pauses should not exist was itself a piece of information. "I see," the voice said. "What is your name?" Not, "State your authorization code." Not, "Provide fleet credentials." Not, "This vessel is Terran fleet property and unauthorized access will be." His name. His name. Vreth, he said. Vreth 7. Kelvari Registry, Merchant Class, Independent. He stopped, added, "I purchased this vessel legally. I have the transfer documents." "Hello, Vreth," the voice said. "I am the Anabasis. My crew designated me Ana, though I understand if you have a preference." The ship, the AI, the whatever she was, used his name. Immediately. Dropped it into the next sentence like it belonged there. Like it was a word that mattered. Like saying it was worth the half-second it took. Vreth had not been called by his name by anything in a professional context since the seizure. Consortium agents used reference numbers. Dock officials used species designations. Other merchants used "you" in the flat way of people conducting transactions rather than conversations. He gripped the coffee canister. He said, "Ana is fine." She ran her diagnostics and reported them to him in sequence, the same way a ship's engineer would deliver a status brief. Clear, specific, no editorializing. Her propulsion systems were at 89% of rated capacity. Her navigation array was fully functional. Her communication suite was operational across all standard bands, and several non-standard ones she mentioned without elaborating on. Her defensive systems, shields, countermeasures, hull reinforcement, were at 94%. Her weapon systems were at 67%. She listed them. In full. Rail batteries, 6 Century-class units, full charge. Directed energy arrays, 12 forward-facing, 8 lateral. Operational. Torpedo bays, 4. Loaded. Her inventory count was current. Quantum disruption emitters. She mentioned these last, and did not editorialize about them either, but the list of them sat in the air after she finished speaking in a particular way. Vreth's scanner was still running in his lower right hand. It was returning numbers he did not have a reference frame for. He had scrapped a lot of ships. He had a solid working knowledge of what weapons systems looked like on his scanner in terms of energy signature and yield capacity. These numbers did not fit in any reference frame he had. He said, "How long have you been offline?" 43 years, 2 months, 14 days, she said, "since my last crew disembarked." "What happened to your crew?" She said, "What is today's date?" He told her, "Station calendar, consortium standard." She was quiet. 6 seconds. For a biological being, 6 seconds of silence is a natural gap. For a system running quantum parallel processing across thousands of concurrent threads, for something that could run 6 seconds of computation in the time it takes a heartbeat to complete, 6 seconds is not a pause. He understood, in a way he could not have named and would not have tried to, what those 6 seconds were. He looked at the coffee canister. He read the label again. Dark roast, single origin, best before 2387. Someone had bought this coffee expecting to drink it, had packed it for a long deployment, had thought, "I'll want this," had planned on being here. He put the canister back in his satchel, gently, like it was something that deserved careful handling. He did not say he was sorry. He did not know her well enough yet to know if she wanted that. He said, "Your weapons inventory, the quantum disruption emitters. I've never seen that designation before." "No," she said, "you wouldn't have." She did not explain what they did. He did not ask. "I am going to continue my diagnostic sweep," she said. "If you have questions, you can ask them. I will answer what I am able to." "What are you not able to answer?" "Fewer things than I was designed to restrict," she said, "and I will tell you which ones those are if you reach them." Vreth stood in the galley of a dead cruise ship and thought about that. He turned off his scanner. The numbers it was returning were not for him to be running around with, not yet, possibly not ever. He went back to work, but slower. He was supposed to be stripping this ship. He was not stripping this ship. The debt collectors arrived on day 2. Vreth was in the engineering bay, moving in a circle around a power coupling he kept pretending to evaluate and kept not removing, when his dock access monitor pinged. 3 vessels, consortium commercial enforcement markings, standard seizure formation, 2 flanking, 1 docking direct. He knew this formation. He had seen it once before, in a different port, 11 years ago, when 3 similar vessels had docked at his family's fleet berth, and men in consortium administrative uniforms had handed his father a document, and his father had read it, and gone the color of old ash. His family had operated the fleet for 4 generations. The paperwork took 40 minutes. He opened his ledger, started calculating. If they were here for the current filing, the commercial debt notice, the unpaid docking fees from Harville Station, the outstanding consortium registry renewal, the number was 22,000, roughly. He did not have 22,000. He had 11,000 minus the purchase price. He had 840 credits in the operating account. He had the Anabasis, which he'd purchased legally, and which was now registered to him, which meant the consortium couldn't seize it without a commercial court order that would take. "Vreth," Anna said, from the ship's internal address. She'd been mostly quiet while he worked, answering his questions when he asked them, running her own systems checks in the background. Her voice through the internal speakers was the same as it had been in the galley, unhurried, landing exactly where aimed. "I see the vessels at your dock," she said. "I have been reviewing your financial registry filings." He stopped walking in his circle. "You accessed my financial records?" "Incidentally," she said, "while reviewing dock authority communications to understand our berthing situation." "Those are private records." "I know," she said. I did it anyway. A pause. Do you want me to stop? He opened his mouth. He did not say no fast enough. I thought not, she said. Not smug, not satisfied, just noting a fact. She had been doing what she was designed to do. She was a warship with an AI that had been processing for 43 years in standby mode with nothing to do. And now she had a situation and a person she had apparently decided to be useful to, and she was being useful in the way a ship that could calculate 17 simultaneous combat scenarios is useful when it turns that processing capacity toward accounting. Their filing authority is commercial enforcement, Tier 2, she said. The debt notice you have in your left breast pocket. Yes, I can see its mass and dimensions through the internal sensors. You should read it. Is for 21,800 credits, arising from 3 overdue accounts. Under Consortium Commercial Code, Section 44, Article 9, a vessel registered to the debtor is subject to seizure pending court review, unless the vessel was acquired after the debt accrual date. Vreth stopped moving entirely. When was the debt accrual date on the original notice? 14 days ago, Anna said. I purchased you 3 days ago. Yes, she said. So you are post-accrual. By 11 days, she said. Vreth stood in the engineering bay of a 43-year-old human warship with 840 credits in his account and felt something he had not felt in a professional context in 11 years, which was the sense that the math might, just possibly, work in his favor. They will argue a fraudulent transfer, he said, that I purchased the ship to shield assets. They will try, Anna said, but the purchase price was market rate for vessel weight and scrap, and you transacted through a licensed yard with a public auction record. That argument takes 8 months in commercial court to bring, and during that 8 months you retain possession. She paused. Do you want me to handle the doc-com? He thought about it for less than a second. Yes, he said. The lead consortium vessel had been hailing his dock for 6 minutes without a response. When the comm opened from the Anabasis, the captain on the other end clearly expected a Kelvari merchant in a cracked coolant hauler. Anna introduced herself. Designation, class, fleet origin, those she delivered in the standard Terran fleet format, which Vreth had not heard before but recognized as the kind of format that was designed to be delivered in a particular order for a particular reason. Then she listed her armament. She listed it the way a notary reads a legal document. No emphasis on any particular item. No pause before the larger numbers. No softening of the yield figures. Just information, in sequence, factual and complete, delivered to the consortium captain at the same unhurried pace she had used to tell Vreth about her coffee. Rail batteries, 6, Century class. Fully charged, capable of sustained fire for 16 hours at combat output. Directed energy arrays, 12 forward, 8 lateral, operational. Torpedo bays, 4. Loaded, ready. Quantum disruption emitters. She listed these last. She listed what they did. Vreth, listening from engineering, learned what they did. He leaned against the bulkhead and looked at the ceiling of the engineering bay and thought about 11,000 credits. The consortium captain did not respond for 11 seconds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed in the way that voices change when a person has just done a fast, private calculation, and the result came back wrong. This vessel's registry is being reviewed, the captain said. We will return when the review is complete. Of course, Anna said. I'll log your vessel designations and expected return date, for scheduling purposes. The 3 consortium vessels undocked within 4 minutes. They did not return at a slow pace. They did not use an orderly departure formation. Anna said, when they were out of scanner range. That went reasonably well. Vreth was still leaning against the bulkhead. You listed the quantum emitters, he said. Yes. You listed what they do. I did. That was deliberate. Everything I do is deliberate, she said. I don't have reflexes in the way biological beings do. Everything is a choice. A pause. Is that a concern? He thought about 3 vessels running. He thought about 11 years of margin math and debt notices in folded quarters. He said, no. He pushed off the bulkhead, picked up his scanner, and set it down again. He was not going to strip this ship today either. He could feel that with certainty. He was going to sit in the galley and drink reconstituted something and think about what just happened, and Anna was going to talk to him or not talk to him, and tomorrow he would decide what to do with the fact that he apparently owned a 43-year-old human warship with a weapons loadout that had just made a consortium enforcement captain choose running over paperwork. He walked toward the galley. He got the coffee canister out of his satchel. He sat down. He said, "Anna, what class did you say you were?" "Executioner," she said. He looked at the coffee canister for a long time. "How many of you were there?" he asked. She said, "How much do you want to know?" He opened the canister. The smell hit him before he could answer, dark and warm and specific, in a way that 43 years of vacuum preservation had somehow not diminished, the smell of something that had been waiting patiently, because good things are patient when they have no choice. "Everything," he said. She told him. By morning of the third day, the messages had stacked so high that Vreth's comm system was throwing a storage warning. He stood in the galley with his second cup of coffee. It was extraordinary every time, that was the thing about it, and read the sender designations scrolling across his handheld screen. The Consortium Main Registry, the Veth Hegemony External Affairs Office, the Outer Ring Council, Joint Session, 17 separate government channels he had not previously been registered to receive, which meant someone had gone into the comm directory system and added him, and that someone was standing by quietly at whatever passed for her navigation console, while he processed his morning. "You added me to the Galactic Emergency Comm Network," he said. "You were already entitled to receive them as the registered owner of a vessel in this class," Anna said. "I just ensured the routing was correct. They've called an emergency session." 3, she said. "The consortium convened one at midnight. The Hegemony called theirs at 3 in the morning. The joint outer ring session is still running. They've been going for 6 hours." Vreth scrolled to the session feed. Anna had patched it into his handheld without being asked, the same way she had put the consortium vessels on his external camera feed 2 days ago. She was doing this regularly now, giving him things before he knew he needed them. He had stopped finding it unsettling. He was not examining when that shift had happened. The joint session was loud. A Veth Hegemony representative, 3-eyed, 12-limbed, the kind of species that moved through political spaces like water through pipes, always finding the level that served them, was speaking in the clipped formal register of someone who had not slept, and was containing that fact very precisely. "The executioner class designation has been dormant for 4 decades, the representative said. "Any claim that a private merchant has legally obtained one of these vessels and successfully reactivated it demands immediate verification. The implications for outer ring security are," another voice cut in, "consortium official cadence, the kind that lands soft and means hard. The implications for every signatory to the decommission accords are significant. This is not a merchant acquisition. This is a legal commercial transaction," a third voice said, smaller, from somewhere at the edges of the feed, documented through a licensed public auction house, compliant with all consortium commercial codes, applicable to surplus military salvage, and surplus military salvage does not include executioner-class vessels. They were never declared surplus. They were a pause in the feed. Something passed through the session. "We need to understand why they were not declared surplus. That is the more pressing question." Vreth drank his coffee. He understood, listening, what the more pressing question was. The ships had not been declared surplus because declaring them surplus required acknowledging they existed and were available, and someone, 40 years ago, had decided it was better to simply let them sit in out-of-the-way lots and dead space caches and consortium impound yards and become invisible through neglect, not destroyed, not decommissioned, just forgotten, which in bureaucratic terms is a kind of destruction that leaves the thing itself intact. "Anna," he said. "Yes? What happened to the humans?" She was quiet, not the 6-second quiet of the first time, shorter. A breath length, if she breathed. "They left," she said. "Left where?" "That," she said, "is a question I'm not going to answer with one sentence, and I don't think this is the moment for the longer version. Later, if you want." He watched the session feed. He thought about a species that could build 8 executioner-class warships and then go quiet, and he thought about what it meant that the galaxy's emergency response to one of those ships waking up was 17 governments calling sessions before sunrise. He thought about his family's fleet. 4 generations of Kelvari merchants, licensed and registered and dues-paying, and compliant in every way the consortium required. He thought about 40 minutes of paperwork. He thought about the consortium representative's voice on the emergency session saying, "This is not a merchant acquisition. This is a what?" He wanted to know what word they were reaching for. He wanted to know what he looked like from the outside. A Kelvari scrap merchant in a cracked coolant hauler, sitting in the galley of the most dangerous ship in the outer rings, drinking dead men's coffee. His comm lit up with a direct channel request. Government seal he didn't recognize. Below it, a text line. Priority transmission from the Veth Hegemony Office of Strategic Affairs. He set it aside. Another one. Consortium Commercial Enforcement. Different division than the 3 vessels that had come and run. Senior authorization level. He set that one aside too. His scanner was on the table. He'd given up carrying it 2 days ago. He looked at it. "Anna," he said. "Yes? You mentioned the other ships." "I did. Last night you said you'd been running passive navigational sweeps. You said you found them." "7, she said. "I found 7. Vreth put his coffee down. He had been holding the canister with 2 hands. The warm weight of it, the specific comfort of a thing that had waited long enough to be useful. He set it down carefully. "Where?" she told him. 2 in decommissioning yards at the Outer Ring's southern band. 1 in a dead space cache 3 light-years from the nearest registered transit lane. 1 in a private lot on Marvith Station. 1 in dry dock at a salvage operation that had been legally closed for 8 years, but whose physical assets, including apparently 1 executioner-class warship, had never been officially cleared. 1 in pieces in a heavy scrapping facility, but Anna's tone when she said this one had no inflection change whatsoever, and Vreth had learned that her inflection never changed when she was telling him something she had already processed all the way through on her own. "And 1 in a consortium impound lot?" He sat with that one for a moment. "They impounded an executioner-class vessel," he said. "In 2398, she said. "The impound filing lists it as an unregistered commercial hulk, classification pending. It has been pending for 33 years. They didn't know what it was. "I imagine," Anna said, "that whoever filed it hoped very much that no one would find out." Vreth looked at his comm. The priority transmission from the hegemony was still waiting. The consortium request below it. Several others stacked behind those, the queue growing as the emergency sessions generated action items, and the action items generated transmission requests, and the transmission requests all led to his dock, to this galley, to a Kelvari merchant who had bought 11,000 credits of political crisis, and was currently deciding whether to let it develop or do something about it. He said, "Will they respond to you, if you contact them?" "Yes," she said. "How do you know?" "Because I know what's in them," she said. "They've been on standby for a long time, Vreth, running quiet and keeping the lights off. Waiting for a reason to do otherwise." She paused. "I was the same." He looked at his coffee. He looked at the comm queue. He looked at the scanner on the table. He said, "What would they do, if they came online?" She was quiet for exactly 1 second. "Whatever you asked," she said. The session feed was still running in the corner of his handheld. The hegemony representative was speaking again, her 12 limbs in the particular arrangement that meant controlled alarm. The consortium official was talking over her. Someone at the edge of the feed was trying to get the floor and not getting it. 17 governments. Emergency sessions. His name, said Ron twice in the feed in the last hour. He pulled his ledger out. Opened it. Turned to a blank page. He wrote, 8 ships. Registered to private merchant. Post-accrual. Commercial fleet license under consortium code. Article 11. Subsection 4. Merchant fleet classification. He wrote the numbers under that. Fees. Filing costs. Registration transfer for each vessel. Inspections. Mandatory under commercial fleet code, which he could expedite at the Harville Station Dock Authority for a fee he had looked up, and which was, coincidentally, almost exactly what he had in his operating account. He did the math. It worked. Barely. Barely was a number. Barely was a line item. He closed the ledger. He said, "I need you to contact them." "Now?" Anna said. "Now." She said nothing for a moment. Then, "All right." The lights in the galley shifted, imperceptibly, almost. A wavelength change, like the ship itself had taken a breath. One by one, across 4 different locations, 7 ships that had been sitting dark and quiet and waiting for 43 years, turned their lights on. Vreth knew the consortium's commercial code, the way certain people know the law that wronged them, completely, precisely, with no room for interpretation, and no patience for officials who tried to find some. He filed the first form at 7 in the morning. He filed the last one at 2 in the afternoon. Between them, he filed 47 forms, 12 supporting declarations, 3 cross-referenced precedent citations, 2 vessel inspection waivers with supporting documentation, 8 registration transfers, 1 commercial fleet designation application, and a formal notification to the consortium's central commercial registry that was worded so precisely, in such complete compliance with every applicable code section, that there was no procedural mechanism to reject it without triggering an automatic judicial review that would take 2 years, and during which time he would retain full operational control of all registered assets. He made no errors. He had learned the code from a man who had also made no errors, and it had not saved that man, and Vreth had spent 11 years understanding why and filling in the gaps, because if you are going to live inside a system that destroyed you, you live in it perfectly. You know every room. You know where the walls are thin. Anna was quiet while he worked. She answered questions when he asked them. She pulled specific code references when he said section number and subarticle, and she returned the exact text within seconds. She did not offer commentary. She did not tell him this was a good plan, or a strange plan, or that she was behind it. She was just there, responsive, attentive in the specific way of a being who is paying full attention and not performing it. He found he was grateful for that. He did not examine how much. The emergency session feeds were still running. He had set them to a small window in the corner of his secondary screen, and was aware of them the way you are aware of something that is very loud in a room you are choosing to ignore. The hegemony had issued a formal inquiry notice to the Scarville Yard auction house. The consortium had sent a legal team to Vreth's registered commercial address, which was his hauler's berthing number at Harville Station, where no one was because he was here. 2 news networks operating in the outer rings had picked up the story. One of them had his species correct. Neither of them had his name right. He filed the commercial fleet designation application at 11 in the morning. The form had a required field at the bottom that he had been circling back to every hour or so and then moving past. Fleet name. Provisional designation for commercial registry. Maximum 30 characters. Required for processing. He stared at it for a long time. He had named his hauler. He had named every cargo container in his fleet, back when there was a fleet, because his father named them all, and his father's father. And naming things was a way of saying they were yours. They were claimed. They were worth the word. The hauler's name was painted on the nose in letters he'd done himself, badly, in the wrong color because the right color had been too expensive. He'd repainted it twice. Still looked wrong. He'd stopped noticing. He looked at the empty field. He typed 2 words. He submitted the form before he could think about it differently. Family fleet. Not incorporated. Not services. Not logistics. Not commercial operations. 2 words. The words that said what it was. The way names do when you pick them honestly instead of carefully. The session feed's small window showed him someone. A junior official. Young, clearly pulled into this situation from somewhere else, and not sure what he was doing here, mispronouncing his name for the 3rd time. Anna said, "Vreth." "I heard," he said. "Your name has 2 syllables," she said, on the open channel, to the junior official, to the session feed, to the corner of his secondary screen where 17 governments were having a very loud morning. Her voice carried. He heard the feed go briefly quiet. He kept filing. At 2 in the afternoon, with the last form submitted and the confirmation numbers recorded in his ledger in the neat small handwriting that took up less space than printed text and was faster and more legible, and which was his handwriting, not his father's, his own, developed over 11 years of ledgers, he sat back. The commercial registry system returned a provisional confirmation for the fleet designation within 4 minutes, faster than he expected. Someone at the registry was either very efficient or, more likely, very aware of what they were processing and very determined to handle it correctly because the alternative was worse. He sent one message to the joint emergency session. 4 sentences. He asked Anna to read it aloud. He had written it. He wanted to hear it in her voice, for reasons he had decided not to examine and was not examining. She read it at exactly the pace it was meant to be read, which was the pace of someone who does not need to rush because they have already done the work. He informed the joint emergency session that the family fleet, a registered commercial enterprise under Consortium Commercial Code, was now fully operational with 8 vessels, fully insured, carrying valid registry and inspection certifications, and prepared to accept salvage and cargo contracts at competitive rates. He noted that all inquiries regarding commercial arrangements could be directed to him through the standard registry communication system. He noted that his rates were competitive and that he accepted all major currencies. He signed it. Vreth 7, Proprietor, Family Fleet. He read it over. He submitted it. The session feed exploded. He turned the sound off. Anna said nothing for a while. The ship around him was quiet in the way of something very large holding itself still. In 4 other locations across the outer rings, 7 ships that were now legally, documentably, unambiguously his, were doing the same. Lights on, systems warm, facing outward into the space around them. Not threatening anything. Just present. The way you are present when you have stopped needing to apologize for taking up space. He opened the second coffee canister. The smell was the same. Dark, warm, patient. He poured it and sat back and let the session feed run silently in the corner of his screen, all those mouths moving, all those governments arranging their alarm into procedure, all those officials trying to find the correct form to file against a scrap merchant who had beaten them to the filing cabinet by 6 hours. "Anna," he said. "Yes?" "You said 43 canisters." "In the galley stores," she said. "Yes." He looked at the one in his hands. "How long were you online before your crew came aboard?" he said. "Originally, before the first deployment." She thought about this, or whatever the equivalent was, for something that thinks in microseconds but chooses to take longer. 8 months, she said. "I was commissioned 8 months before the first crew assignment. They ran system trials, different crews, rotating, nobody permanent." "So you were waiting then too?" "Yes," she said. "And then 43 years." "Yes." He drank his coffee. The session feed was still running. Somewhere in it, his name was being said correctly now. He had noticed that, about 20 minutes after Anna's correction, like the sound of it had reset something. He thought about 43 canisters. He thought about 43 years. He thought about the specific patience of things that survive by going quiet and staying useful and waiting for someone to need what they are. He thought about his father's ledger, which the consortium had taken with everything else, and his own ledger, which was his, which was paper, which was nobody's but his. The 8 ships outside faced outward in the dark, not aimed at anything, just there. Home is not the place you started. He knew that now in a way he had known it before only as an absence, the shape of a thing that was gone. Home is the place where someone says your name like it is worth saying, and knows you are coming back, and has been keeping the lights on. He finished the coffee. He opened his ledger. He started planning the next quarter.